a steering wheel. And so with a car, if you can power the outside tires when you turn the steering wheel a little bit, that can almost be just as effective or more effective as the steering wheel is. Just by putting more power to the outside, it'll turn the car by itself. So you can make a front-wheel drive car be more effective and responsive really than any other front-wheel drive car that is just simply sending power to both tires. So the way that this works is when you turn the steering wheel, it has a sensor that says how much you're turning the steering wheel, and it literally brakes the inside tire very smoothly a little bit so that naturally sends the power to the outside, and the outside is literally spinning with more power than the inside, and that turns the car better.
Do you like that from your perspective as an enthusiast driver, or do you think maybe we should go and do that?
If there's a racing series that would let something like that in it, everybody would have it. Because performance-wise, there's no other way to go. The steering wheel is incredibly limited. When you turn the steering wheel, the car wants to go straight, and the contact patches are telling the car, no, you need to use whatever friction I have available to take that inertia and completely change its direction. But with the torque vectoring, it doesn't have to go through any of those physics. It literally will just twist the car. And so if you could get away with that in a racing series, then you'd have a huge advantage. There are some cars that do it through different techniques, though. I think there are some cars that have clutch packs that accelerate an outside tire.
Right. Instead of even
yeah. And something like this is certainly the lightest weight way that you can possibly do it.
Let's get close to where.
And I think it's pretty effective. I'm excited about getting in the electronics of something like this and actually trying to map that torque vectoring and push it to the limits to see how aggressive you can make it for a racetrack application. I think it's pretty cool. Because there are some series like Time Attack and stuff like that where there just aren't any rules and you can get away with that stuff.
Do you get to see stuff behind the scenes, like maybe the rebel knuckle technology? You know, if they're talking about it on a new river. I know they don't want to talk about it. But
I don't. Usually what happens is I'll get to go test some stuff and it'll be like more like feeling suspension tuning. Like there's always decisions that get made, like how stiff you make the car, how low you make the car. And usually it'll be fairly late in the game when the engineers will allow somebody who's connected with driving or marketing department to come in and play with their toys. But so I don't get in too much on the early part. It's something that I really want to start to do, is do more development stuff, suspension tuning stuff, and things like that with performance departments within Ford. But it's very cool stuff to play with.
How have you seen things kind of change over time from when you first drove the initial ST till maybe now? Maybe some different slight changes they've made over time?
Again, most of this was done in Europe, so a lot of this was done without anybody getting to taste it here. But one thing that I did go test out was an STR, which was the race version of this. And okay, as a racer, I know the manufacturer's involved and they sell cars to customers. The way racing generally works is you have a sponsor, and a race team owns a car, and the race team says, all right, if you want to run my car in this series, it's going to cost you this much money. You go to your sponsor and you try to raise this much plus a little bit so you can afford to fly there and not live in the back of your truck. And that's generally how racing works. Well, those race teams, that's how most race teams are. They're not usually manufacturer supported. They go out and they build a race car themselves and they develop themselves. The more money they put into building the race car, the more successful that race car can be on the track, and the more money you're willing to pay to drive that car. What Ford has done, and really I think Porsche historically is the only other manufacturer to do it to this extent, which says a lot, because Porsche is probably known as the most winningest racing mark in the world. They took a car and they did millions and millions of dollars worth of research and development on the race car before ever allowing race teams to buy it. So they literally Ford has the resources to go to the Miami Speedway, close down the whole thing for like 4 or 5 days. No race team can afford to do that, but a manufacturer can do that. Put it in wind tunnel testing and do actual wind tunnel time, which is, every night is hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. Do suspension tuning on 7-post rigs that computer map the geometry of all of the rigs. I mean, there's an enormous amount of R&D that goes into making a race car successful like that and competitive as soon as it hits the ground. Of course, Ford gets a big benefit because their cars are fast right off the bat. They don't have to wait for backyard mechanic guys to fix them up year after year and make them faster and faster. But the teams, of course, get an advantage by buying a turnkey STR car, and they get drivers to hop on in. It's pretty amazing. It's something that I was lucky enough this spring to see the inside of, the inner workings of that program. The second part that I thought was pretty impressive is the fact that they have a pretty strong commitment to using basically everything you see here in the race car. Where most of the other cars, if you look under the hood of the Mini that's in the same series or any of those others, it's aftermarket turbos, aftermarket everything, you know, with a mini body on it. And Ford has set a standard to use the stock turbo, the stock suspension parts, and stock geometry, even, you know, all of those things, and use them in the race car.